Well, greetings, citations, everybody. Welcome to this companion video here on my YouTube channel. I'm your host, John Campea. What is a companion video? Well, I'm glad that you asked. Now, every day on the John Campea Show, in the morning and open mic in the afternoons, we take some live questions, but we don't always have time to answer all of the live questions. But I want to make sure those questions you sent in get answered, so we gather up all those unused questions and we bring them over here and we start to address them on companion videos. So, without wasting any time, let's get right to some of those unanswered questions that we've got piled up here. And we're going to start things off with Chris Smith. And Chris Smith writes, where do you put the odds that the 3 MCU movies next year make over $2.5 billion collectively? All right, interesting question, because this year, in 2018, there were 3 MCU films, right? We had Black Panther, we had Avengers Infinity War, we had Ant-Man. Collectively, those 3 films made over $4 billion. 4! So let's look at 2019. Well, we've got Avengers 4 coming out. Now, I'm not convinced Avengers 4 will hit $2 billion. It may not. But it's at least safe to say it'll at least come close. It'll come close. I'm thinking the 1.7, 1.9, 2, 2.1. It's going to come in that neighborhood somewhere. So let's just roughly say $2 billion. Since Avengers Infinity War made just over $2 billion, I think it's safe to say that Avengers 4 will at the very least come close. So let's roughly say 2, for argument's sake. Well, can the 3 movies make over 2.5? Well, now you've got Captain Marvel and Spider-Man Far From Home left over, and all they would have to make is $500 million between them. That's a no-brainer. I mean, the last Spider-Man film, Spider-Man Homecoming, made over $800 billion. So, theoretically speaking, just Avengers 4 and Spider-Man Far From Home should put them over $2.5 billion. Then add on top of that Captain Marvel, which we don't know what Captain Marvel's going to do, but you know what? I think it's safe to say it's at least going to make $500 million, right? Doesn't need to make $600 million, doesn't need to make $700 million, doesn't need to make $1 billion. But I think it's fairly safe to say if Ant-Man and the Wasp can make over $600 million, a Captain Marvel can probably make $5 billion. So now you're looking at over $3 billion. So I would say, Chris, that the odds of the 3 MCU movies next year making over $2.5 billion, I'd put it up, nothing's guaranteed, but I put it at like 90%. 90% certainty the 3 MCU films next year make over $2.5 billion. That's my guess at any rate. All right, let's move on now to Warren Lucas, who writes, the Conjuring universe box office return on investment is insane. Just over $100 million in cost and $1.3 billion in the box office. Best production model out there now? Well, no, not. I mean, look, it's the best production model for the type of movies they do. But remember, the types of movies they do are very different from comic book movies or sci-fi movies or other types of things, right? They are small, horror-based films where you don't need much cast, you don't really need many sets. I mean, a lot of these films happen in like 2 or 3 sets. You don't need to spend a lot of money. There's just not a lot of money that needs to be spent. Like, so you can't say, oh my goodness, DC should adopt the Conjuring model. Well, unfortunately, the Conjuring model doesn't work for something like Star Trek or Star Wars or the MCU or a James Bond film or the DCEU. Like, it's a great model. It's the perfect model for the types of movies they make. Right? It's the perfect model for the types of movies that they make. The thing is, not everybody makes those types of movies. So it's not a model that's applicable to everybody. Right? So your model for planting your rose garden is not the same model that the farmer of a 500-acre farm should use for, doing their crops. They're different things. Not that I'm a farmer and that I would know. Maybe they're the exact same thing. But at any rate, so it's the perfect model for them, but it's not a model you can necessarily take and replicate amongst other films, necessarily. I'm sure there are some you could, but it's not a wide-reaching kind of model you can use. Levi Road writes, Shia LaBeouf underrated for the job he did in Fury. Oh my God. Oh yeah. Oh my God is right. Like, you've got this movie Fury with Brad Pitt, John Bernthal, and other heavyweight actors. Easily easily, Shia LaBeouf gave the best performance in that movie. And they were all good in it. They all gave good performances, for sure. Shia LaBeouf gave the best performance in that movie. I'm telling you that right. It's all subjective, but I'm telling you that right now from my point of view. Shia LaBeouf easily gave the best performance in that thing, out-acting John Bernthal, out-acting Brad Pitt. I'm not saying he's necessarily would be better at everything, but in that one movie, yeah, absolutely, he stood out, man. Nicholas Pereira writes, from now on, I think it's too radical to say that the Spider-Verse failure will allow Spider-Man to remain in the MCU. Oh, that's just totally counter. That's the exact opposite, actually. But to say that its failure will necessarily make him out is too radical too. No, it makes perfect sense. Nicholas follows up with, Sony was aware at the time of the agreement with Marvel that their future Spider-Verse wasn't a safe bet. Well, no bet in movies is a safe bet. But they agreed to share Spidey because they didn't dare make a new reboot without Marvel. That's false. That's false. Of course they could make another reboot without Marvel. They absolutely could have. Sony, like some people, there's this myth out there. There's this incredible myth out there that Sony films started flopping. The Sony Spider-Man films started flopping. They didn't. No single Spider-Man film ever made under $700 million under Sony. Put that in perspective. No Spider-Man film that Sony ever produced made under $700 million. It's never happened. Of course, this whole myth that Sony knew they couldn't dare make one without Marvel. Yes, they could. They very easily could. But it was an opportunity that presented both sides with some great benefits. Not to mention at the time, Sony was, like, as a big company, Sony was facing a lot of drama. As a company. Not even just the film division. I mean, Sony as a whole was facing a lot of drama. There was a lot of upside for Marvel and a lot of upside for Sony for them to do it together. But make no mistake about it, they absolutely could have done another one. They had never made a single one that came in under $700 million. There are a lot of MCU movies that made under $700 million, but never once did Sony make a Spider-Man film that came in under $700 million. So this notion that they wouldn't dare make another Spider-Man film without Marvel. Oh, easily they could have. Marvel's made lots of films that made under $700 million. Sony never did. Sony never made a single Spider-Man that made under $700 million, and we could go down this really impressive list of Marvel films that did make under $700 million. So yeah, they could have. Make no mistake about it, they could have. Was it a good move to make that deal? Yes, I think it was a good move for them. I think it was a good move for Marvel. I think the results of that was a great Spider-Man Homecoming movie. That was a true collaboration between them, and I think the results were great. And I want to see Spider-Man stay in the MCU. Not because I don't think Sony could do anything good with him, but I really like the way that their two sensibilities are making this Spider-Man character, and I like it a lot. And I like to see him stay, but this notion that they couldn't possibly do another one without Marvel is... Look, maybe as fans, we want to go because I'm with you, right? Like, I want to see Spider-Man stay in the MCU. But as fans, we start losing perspective and start making up these fairy tale scenarios. Oh, they couldn't have possibly... Well, yes, they could have. They obviously could have. Even their worst Spider-Man movie. And they made some awesome Spider-Man movies. The first Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2. I love the first Amazing Spider-Man. Second Amazing Spider-Man, not so much. But even their two worst Spider-Man movies, Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2, even their worst ones made huge bank. Even their worst ones made huge bank. I just think as fans, we put these blinders on and we lose sense of reality. Reality is... Forget the name Spider-Man. This company, Sony, has this property, Property X. They've made 5 films in Property X, and not a single one of them made under $700 million. Does that sound like a company that can't possibly do another one without another company? Obviously not. Obviously not. But we let our fandom get in the way. We let our I do it. I do it too, man. You do it. I do it. As fans, we all do it. This is one of the curses of being a fan. Fans of sports, fans of movies, fans of TV shows. We put our fan blinders on. But look, when you just boil it down to the facts, Company A has Property X. Take the names out of it. Movie Company A has film property X. They have made 5 films with film property X, not a single one failing to make under $700 million. Is Company A in desperation need and wouldn't dare make another film X without the aid of another company? That's a ridiculous notion. Again, take the names out of it and just call it Company A and Property X. Look at the facts. Can we, just looking at the facts, say, well, clearly this company can't make these Film Property X movies? Obviously they can. And obviously they've had success. But it doesn't mean that there wasn't benefit for Film Company A to partner up with Film Company B and do something a little bit different. And it ended up great. But yeah, I mean, this notion that they couldn't have possibly done it without Marvel, I reject that note. As again, it's all subjective, but as from my point of view as a fan, I completely reject that notion. Let's see here. Nicholas follows up with, if their minimum goal for Venom really is $380 million at the box office, they can't expect their future projects to make as much hype and money. Oh, sure they can. Absolutely you can. We can easily say that Venom is their biggest cartridge. Yes, Venom is their biggest cartridge, but it's their first step. It's their first movie into trying to establish a cinematic universe. Look, I have never said that Venom in a Sony's Venomverse, if you will, is going to work. Not at all. This thing could very easily crash and burn and be an amazing flop and be a complete failure. It easily could. But it also has upside and it also has potential to do quite well. The notion here is that you build a cinematic universe. You build that if you come out with a Venom, the idea is if you come out with Venom and if you succeed in getting the audience on board with it, and if you succeed in getting it some critical praise, and if you succeed with making a little bit of box office bucks, then the notion is that's where you're building from. You're starting with that. That's just your first step. Now, like if Venom comes out and makes $400, $450, $460 million, that's great because at that point it's profitable. That now becomes a movie that made money. And the idea is if you can get the audience on board and they like it and they get excited about it, the notion is that when you put out chapter 2 in this new universe, those fans will want to come back again. That's the idea. So, yeah, again, Nicholas, I reject this notion that says, well, if you only make this much with your first movie, then you can't expect to do any better later. That's incorrect. That's just incorrect thinking. Now, the exact opposite could happen, right? Like they put out Venom and it flops. Well, then that spells disaster. That spells disaster. And that's when I think that Sony's going to go, well, we couldn't make it work without Spider-Man, so we better go get Spider-Man back, because every time we make a Spider-Man movie, minimum, we make over $700 million, so that's what we got to do. Anyway, Nicholas follows it up with, and if Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was the hit Sony is desperate for, the film comes out 2 weeks before Christmas, and the animation seems to be legit. It may have some financial potential. It may have more financial potential than the rest. I don't agree, but I think you're onto something with a train of thought. Like the notion of a different avenue. You know, maybe animation. I don't dispute at all the notion that, hey, that could be something. Where I, at least for now, disagree, but could be totally wrong about this, is I don't think you're going to see Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is going to be that big of a hit. And number one, I didn't like the animation style. It hasn't set well with me. I'm not a big fan of the animation style of it. I never sensed from average film fans any kind of excitement for this movie, any kind of buzz for this movie. Even amongst the hardcore online fans, I mean, when the first trailer dropped, it was like, ooh, but no lasting impression, like no lasting sustained buzz. It might do an okay opening weekend because in its opening weekend, the only film it's competing against is Mortal Engines, the Peter Jackson produced Mortal Engines movie. That's the only one it's competing against in its opening weekend. So it has the potential to do okay opening weekend. It's just going to get slaughtered after its opening weekend, though, because after its opening weekend comes Mary Poppins. After Mary Poppins, you got Alita Battle Angel, you got Bumblebee, you got Aquaman. I mean, it's just going to get halted in its tracks immediately. So I don't even know that if Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse doesn't do all that well at the box office, I don't know that that's a fair assessment because there was so much competition there. So I'll say, like, let's say, I don't know, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse makes $150 million in total. Well, I don't know that that's fair because it had to run into, after its opening weekend, these big other powerhouse movies that were targeting many of the same demographic that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is. That might not be a fair assessment. So either way, though, I just don't see that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is going to be that big of a hit. I really don't. I don't sense it from the audience. I don't sense it from the film fans. I just don't think it will. Now, then we can get into a discussion about, well, what qualifies as a hit? Does Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, does that need to make $400 million to be considered a hit? Does it only need to make $200 million to be considered a hit? Like, it all depends on where we draw that line. But we're going to have to wait and see. And you know what? To be fair, let's get a little bit closer to the release date. Let's wait and see till they put out another 1 or 2 trailers for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, because maybe we'll see a lot more enthusiasm for the movie than what we're seeing right now. I mean, we're still 3 months out. So let's give it some time. Maybe it can build up something, and maybe animation becomes a stream. I don't think it will, but the possibility is certainly there, and I think you're onto something with that. So we'll just have to wait and see. Nicholas follows up, artistically speaking, I'm more interested in this film, speaking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, than in their version of The Incredible Hulk Venom. Well, you're in the minority. Animated superhero films could be a niche to grow. History hasn't shown that. The Incredibles works, and Spidey is a bigger IP. Well, here's the thing. There's a reason why Marvel, DC have always just shuffled their animated stuff to straight to home video, because they know it's not bigger. To pull out the rare exception like The Incredibles is it's never a safe thing to try to build your argument on the exception. All right? It's never a safe thing to build your argument around the exception. I always use this basketball analogy, but it's true. You ever see once in a while, even if you're not a sports fan, you ever see in a basketball game, sometimes the basketball player will like be at mid-court, like a mile away from the basket, and just heave a shot up from mid-court, right? 95 times out of 100, those shots miss. But every once in a while, some miracle Hail Mary heaving from half court as the clock's winding down to 0 will go in. And it makes Sports Center and hits all the highlight packages, right? But that doesn't mean that heaving up half-court shots is a good strategy. It's not a good strategy. It almost always fails. Yes, there are exceptions. There is that odd, rare time that it goes in, and it's the buzzer beater, and everybody, yeah, that happens, sure. But that's the exception. That's the rare exception. You don't want to build your strategy and your philosophy around exceptions. You want to build your strategy and philosophies around probabilities, right? You want to build your strategies around probabilities, not exceptions. That's the safest way to do it. I remember I was playing poker with a buddy of mine once, and we got involved in this hand, and he tried to bluff me. I saw through the bluff. I called the bluff, and I ended up winning the hand. And he said, "You're crazy for calling," because he was trying to bluff and trying to get me to fold, but I called instead. He said, "You're crazy for calling." I said, "Why was I crazy for calling? I won the hand." He goes, "Yeah, but I could have had a straight there." Because there were cards on the table that made it possible that he had a straight. It was possible. I had 3 of a kind. So a straight would have beaten my hand. But he goes, it's possible I could have had a straight. And I looked at him and I said, I don't deal in possibilities. I deal in probabilities. And when I saw that he had a 9, I knew it was even less likely that you happen to have the straight. I deal in probabilities, not possibilities when it comes to poker, which is why I've always been fairly successful at poker. I kind of follow the Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire strictly plays poker by math. And that's why he's been really damn successful. I try to just deal with math and probabilities and things like that. So I've been fairly successful. Anyway. So, no, I mean, I disagree. However, again, I will concede that it's a possibility. I mean, look, the reality is, even if it's however unlikely, let's say Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse comes out and it makes, hell, I don't know, $80 million opening weekend, which would be fabulous if it did. So let's say Into the Spider-Verse comes out, makes $80 million opening weekend. It's not going to make $80 million, but let's say for argument's sake it does. And critics love it, audiences love it, all that kind of stuff. And these are big, giant ifs that we're dealing with. And you could apply these ifs to any movie, but just for argument's sake, let's go with it for now. Makes $80 million opening weekend, critics love it, audiences love it. The repercussions of that would be, I guarantee you, some late night emergency meetings happening in Marvel's studio offices and in DC studio offices talking about, should we be looking more seriously at putting out some animated content? Should we be looking more seriously at putting out animated content? Because these yahoos over at Sony, they just put out this Spidey Into the Spider-Verse movie and it's made them a whole bunch of money. People seem to like it a lot and you know they're going to make a sequel to it. If that happens, and again, that's a massive if. I don't think that's going to happen. But if it does, I think what you're suggesting here is that we could see a bit of a paradigm shift. And I will say this, if that happens, I don't disagree. I think we very well could be seeing the beginnings of a slight paradigm shift. I think you'll see Marvel start to have some serious thoughts about putting out feature animated stuff, and DC having some considerations about putting out feature animated stuff. For the most part, I think most of Marvel and DC's animated stuff is shit. For the most part. There are exceptions. There are exceptions to that on both Marvel and DC side, but for the most part, I think all their animated stuff is crap. But that's just my opinion. I know a lot of people like their stuff, fine. But yeah, man, if they knock it out, I just don't think it's going to do that. So, but we'll find out soon enough. December 21st is coming. All right, Jedi Bananas writes, Cavill out as Superman, an absolute travesty. What are the chances Marvel scoops him up to play Captain Britain? My question is, I've been hearing a lot of people ask me this question. My question is, why are we even asking that question? What, because Henry Cavill played Superman, that means he's automatically a good fit to play a superhero in another movie? And what makes us think Superman would want, like Henry Cavill would want to go just jump in and start playing and Captain Britain? I don't think so. I don't think so. That's not to say we couldn't see Henry Cavill pop up in an MCU movie, but Captain Britain, no. And, you know, I think he might want to get away from the superhero thing for a while. Because, again, you know, I've been saying for months, I believe Henry Cavill is the presumptive favorite to be the next James Bond. I don't know that, not at all. It could very well be a bunch of other guys. But for me, Henry Cavill is the presumptive favorite to be the next James Bond. He's got this new series with The Witcher that everybody's excited about. He'll have other things too. What are the chances that he just jumps over to Marvel? I think pretty low. Why? There are 1,000 other actors out there who are really good. So I personally, I wouldn't look at him to do something like that. I love Henry Cavill. Jesse Estall writes, Warner Brothers drops the ball again. What's the point of watching Wonder Woman and Aquaman? How can you mess up when you have the most iconic comic book characters? Well, because making movies is almost impossible. Making good movies is one of the most impossible things to do in the world. It's difficult. It's hard. That's why you get people who have dedicated their whole lives to making movies still put out bad movies sometimes. It's difficult, dude. How hard can it be? Impossible. You could never do it. I could never do it. How hard could it be? Next to impossible. That's how hard. That's how hard. It's really hard. And I think, I've mentioned this before, but I think we as film fans, and I know I do this, I think you guys probably do this too. We as film fans, what we do is we get our perception skewed because Marvel has done it so well. Marvel's done it so successfully that it skews our perception of it to think, oh, then it's easy. If Marvel could do it, then it must be easy. No, man, it's It's Herculean what they've done. It's absolutely Herculean what they've done. So it's difficult. As far as what's the point of watching Wonder Woman and Aquaman, to see good movies. Hopefully they're good movies. My question is, because I've been getting asked this a lot lately, it's like, why would I even bother watching Aquaman or Shazam or Wonder Woman now? My question is, what does Henry Cavill, if he's leaving as Superman, what does that have to do with Aquaman or Shazam or Wonder Woman? What does that have to do with it? That's like saying, I just heard that Netflix has pulled old Seinfeld episodes off of their network. Why should I bother buying a new Ford car? What does one have to do with the other? What I want to say to my fellow film fans is, if Henry Cavill is indeed done as Superman, what does that have to do with the upcoming Aquaman movie? He's not in the upcoming Aquaman movie. What on earth does that have to do with that? We watch the movie because we're hoping it'll be a good, entertaining movie and we enjoy ourselves at the movie. That's why we watch Aquaman. That's why we go see Wonder Woman. That's why we go see Shazam. And if they suck, they suck. But if they suck, it'll have nothing to do with Henry Cavill not being Superman anymore. And if they're great, it'll have nothing to do with Henry Cavill not being Superman anymore. So when somebody says to me, why should I bother watching these movies now? The question I want to throw back is, what does one have to do with the other? How are you seeing any sort of connection between Henry Cavill playing Superman and the potential upside and the potential greatness of an Aquaman movie? They're two separate topics. I don't know why we're trying to cross them over, dude. Hans writes, over or under 10%, Captain Marvel ends with Carol Danvers getting Nick Fury's message but dust from Thanos' snap. Two different things here. Number one, we don't even know she's going to get that pager message in this movie. We don't even know that's going to happen. So that's a big if. I'd say under 10%. I'd say under 10%. I don't think Captain Marvel gets dusted because I don't think the dusting retroactively takes place in history. If the dusting were to take place retroactively, then that means all the Avengers would have no memory of the people that died, hence there's no purpose for Avengers 4. Thanos does the snap, half the universe disappears in that moment. They don't disappear through history, right? So I'm going to take, but I wouldn't say 0% chance because maybe they're going to introduce some other kind of mechanism. But yeah, I'm going to take the under 10% on that. Okay, Michael Jones writes, hey, John, still loving The Office. Yeah, isn't it great? I'm so glad a bunch of you guys have started watching The Office since we've been talking about it on the show so much. I'm in the middle of season 4. Great season, by the way. I love season 4. But I live in North Carolina, so no movies this weekend. Bracing for Florence. So obviously this came out a little while ago. And here's hoping you guys were able to batten down the hatches and all thoughts and positive thoughts to all you guys who were down there affected by those storms. Watcher X writes, why, here we go again. Why see Wonder Woman and Aquaman now if resetting anyway? Well, okay. Why see Wonder Woman and Aquaman if, and by the way, it doesn't look like Warner Brothers is going to be resetting the universe. They should. I believe Warner Brothers should reboot the DC universe. But it looks like they're not doing that. So we don't even have to worry about that. But even if they were rebooting, why not see Wonder Woman and Aquaman? You know what that's like saying? Seriously, follow me here. That's like saying, why watch Goodfellas? Why watch Goodfellas if there's no sequel? There's no sequel to Goodfellas. What's the point in watching it? There's no purpose. There's no point in watching Goodfellas, everybody. Schindler's List? What? There's no sequel? Well, why should I watch Schindler's List? What's the point of watching Schindler's List if there's not a sequel that comes after it? Shawshank Redemption, one of the greatest films of all time. Shawshank Redemption. What, there's no sequel? Well, I'm not going to watch the first one then. What's the point? What's the point in watching a sequel to Shawshank Redemption? Taxi Driver? 12 Angry Men? Apocalypse Now? Oh, everybody talks like these are some great movies, but I see that there's no sequels to them. What's the point? Of course, the point, my brother in film fandom, the point is that hopefully they're good, entertaining movies. That's the point. The point is you go in to watch them to enjoy them. And really, look, I say this with all the love in my heart, but if you've got the attitude that, well, if there's no sequel that comes after it, then I can't enjoy it. Well, come on, what kind of thinking is that? What kind of thinking is that? We go to see a movie to enjoy the movie on its own merits for what it is. Maybe it'll suck, but hopefully it'll be great. And we get a great, fun movie that we get to add to our memories. And we can talk about for years to come. What's the point? So look, first of all, it looks like they're not rebooting, so the conversation kind of comes moot anyway, right? But if they were rebooting, the point of watching Wonder Woman and the point of watching Aquaman and the point of watching Shazam is the same point of watching any movie. You go in to have a good time and be entertained. That's the point. And if you're of the mindset that if there's no more sequel coming after it, I can't enjoy it, well, then maybe you need to reevaluate resetting your bar a little bit. Because if that's your mindset, then you have no point ever watching some of the greatest films in cinematic history. So the point of watching Aquaman and Flash, or Aquaman, well, if they ever make a Flash, Aquaman and Wonder Woman and Shazam is hopefully they're good movies that we can go and enjoy. Period. End of sentence. That's why we go see them. Whether or not they're rebooting the universe or not. Let's see here. Score Geek writes, could Cavill be strategizing to up his value in other properties so that he can come back and possibly have more say in the direction that Supes goes in? No. And they shouldn't do it. Henry Cavill is an actor. He's an actor. He has none and should have no say in the direction that the character goes. He's just the actor. And the actor has a very important role to play, but the storytelling is not it. Everybody knows I love Henry Cavill. I've been espousing Henry Cavill for years. I love this dude. But no, as a fan, I don't want him to have any say in the direction Superman goes. What does he know about Superman? What does he know about filmmaking? He's an actor. I mean, so no, I don't think so. And I don't think he's just strategizing. Look, I think what happens here, and I'm only speculating as a fan, I think Henry Cavill was asking for more than what Warner wanted to give him. I think Henry was probably just asking for what he felt he was worth. Warner Brothers probably thought that's outside of our framework right now. We're not going to do it. And they had a breakdown, and now we're not. And besides, it looks like Warner Brothers didn't have a lot of plans for Superman anyway, which just boggles my mind. But no, I don't think this is him trying to just angle anything. And I don't think this is certainly not him trying to get creative control over the direction of the character, which I don't want him to have, even though I'm a big fan of him as an actor. But yeah, that's just my point of view on it. Mason Barr writes, what's a Nirvana and who's Kurt Cobain? Well, assuming for a second you're not just joking around, because, hey, Nirvana and Kurt Cobain were a long time ago. Nirvana is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame band, and Kurt Cobain was their lead singer who tragically committed suicide. K Major writes, my dick fell off. We were talking about The Fly the other day. Let's keep things going. Thanks so much for bringing that up, K Major. Dean Classic writes, I've always been that guy that would defend Warner Brothers and DC. Consider this the day I firmly say, fuck Warner Brothers and their DC pursuits. Life is short. Well, look, I'm going to say this. I have never been one to shy away from criticizing DC and Warner Brothers when I believe they have done something dumb. Because I am a fan. You have to understand, I come from as a sports fan. I come from a sports fan background. I'm a hardcore sports fan. What sports fans understand that a lot of movie fans don't seem to get is that the people who will complain the most about the Toronto Maple Leafs are the people who love the Toronto Maple Leafs the most. The people who will complain about the Philadelphia Eagles are the people who love the Philadelphia Eagles the most because they care the most. That doesn't always mean our complaints are legitimate. That doesn't mean our complaints are always right. And that doesn't mean our complaints are always expressed in the best way. But we understand if you see somebody really fired up, angry about something dumb the Philadelphia Eagles did, chances are that dude is a big Philadelphia Eagles fan. And sports fans understand this. I found in a lot of ways movie fandom hasn't quite got that yet. I've complained a bunch about DC when they've done some dumb things. A lot of people in the online space then jump to the conclusion that I hate DC. And I'm like, you've clearly never been a sports fan, because you would understand that if I hated DC or if I didn't like DC, I just wouldn't care about these dumb things that they're doing. I just wouldn't care. Like, I'm not a Philadelphia Eagles fan, right? So when the Philadelphia Eagles do something dumb, I don't care. I don't get worked up about it because I don't care. You know, if you're not a New England Patriot fan, then when the New England Patriots do something dumb, you're not going to get upset about it because you don't care. But if you're a fan of the Eagles and they do something dumb, you care. If you're a fan of the Patriots and they do something dumb, you care. And to me, if you're a fan of DC and they do something dumb, nobody should care more about that than you. Anyway, that's just the philosophy I have. So because I love the DC universe and I like all the movies and I want them to succeed and I'm cheering for them constantly, I'm the one who gets the most upset when I see them do something dumb because I want them to do well. I wish I didn't care. I wish I could care less if they succeeded or failed. But the fact of the matter is I do care because I want them to do great. So keep all that in mind. Now, getting back to the actual question, like, look, if we're talking about the Henry Cavill situation, nobody's more upset about it than me, as from a fandom point of view. Obviously, there are other people who care more, but nobody cares more about this and more upset about this than me. Everybody knows I've been banging on the Henry Cavill drum ever since Man of Steel came out. I am the biggest Man of Steel fan out there. I think Henry Cavill's the best Superman we've ever had. Blah, 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 blah. And I think it's idiotic and dumb the way Warner Brothers is treating Superman. I think it's kind of really a shame and a big mistake and something that they've dropped the ball on if Henry Cavill gets away from them, all that kind of stuff. But I also believe there are other actors in the world who can step in and play Superman. Other actors who might do almost as well as Henry Cavill. Other actors who might do just as well as Henry Cavill. Hell, there are other actors out there who may step in and do better than Henry Cavill. I am upset by how they're treating Superman. I am upset at the notion that they may have lost Henry Cavill as Superman. That all bothers me. And when we're talking about that topic specifically, you'll see that I'm upset by it. As a fan, I'm upset by it. But I'm not going to step back and go, fuck Warner Brothers and everything else they're doing when it's just one actor in one role. Warner Brothers and DC's movies are made by thousands and thousands and thousands of creative professionals who do these movies and put them together. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But it's a puzzle of thousands of pieces, not one. Have they made some mistakes? Yes. Should we complain when they make these mistakes? Yes. Should we put a spotlight on when they're making mistakes? Yes. But does that mean the whole thing should just be thrown out with the bathwater? I don't think so. Look, we got Aquaman coming out. And again, I just don't see how Henry Cavill's labor dispute with Warner Brothers has anything to do with how good or bad Aquaman as a standalone film is going to be. Why would I take this movie Aquaman? Like, if I'm a movie fan, why would I throw away this? Why would I just say screw Warner Brothers and everything DC related? Why would I do that? Why would I toss out Aquaman like that? Why would I rob myself of going to enjoy a potentially really good, fun, entertaining movie like Aquaman? Why would I do that? And maybe the movie will suck, but I don't know that yet, so I'm going to go in with hopes high. Just because one actor in a puzzle made up of thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces. They make a mistake with okay, they made a mistake, we should point it out, we should talk about it, we should complain about it, we should hold them accountable for it, but that doesn't mean we throw the entire thing out. And that's why I still have hope in the DC cinematic universe, or whatever it is they're calling it these days. Do I get frustrated with DC? Hell yes. Do I think they've made some boneheaded moves? Hell yes. Someone someday is going to have to stand up and take responsibility for the fact that we're not getting a Ben Affleck directed Batman movie. But that's another topic for another time. Should we hold them accountable for it? Yes. Should we put their feet to the fire for it as fans, the ones who pay them our money? Yes. But at the same time, look, you're going to make mistakes. Bad things are going to happen. And hey guys, lest we forget, Marvel was this close to parting ways with Robert Downey Jr. That was just a couple of years ago. Marvel and Robert Downey Jr. were this close to having their whole relationship break down and having Robert walk away. And look, the world would have gone on. Life would have gone on. They would have gotten somebody else to come in and play the role, and everything would have been fine. But they were able to keep him. They were able to fix it, and that's great. But let's not pretend like even Marvel doesn't struggle with that sometimes. Of course they do. They came this close to losing Robert Downey Jr. years ago. And they were able to pull it out, and they were able to make the deal. Great. So let's not pretend it's only Warner Brothers' fault. You know what I mean? Other people are suffering from it. And even when they make mistakes, and they do make mistakes, some mistakes that make us as film fans want to pull our hair out, but let's not throw the whole thing away and stop recognizing when they do some things pretty well. And maybe Aquaman will be one of those things. I'm staying optimistic about it at any rate, but that's just me. Marvin7777 writes, does the audience have selective memory when it comes to Batman killing? Yes, they do. I don't remember the no killing rule being present in Burton's Batman or the others. Why does Affleck's Batman get pointed out? Yeah, a lot of people forget Batman killed several times in the Tim Burton versions. He's also killed many, many times in the comics. And I'd say, as anybody who's read any comic, there are 1,000 times every year that Batman does something to somebody that easily could have resulted in their deaths. But Batman just gets lucky that they don't. Heads being smashed against concrete, which Batman does a lot of. That's one of the favorite action visual images they'd like to do in Batman. Batman's hand on a criminal's head being slammed into a wall or into concrete or something like that. You see teeth flying out. In real life, that could kill people. So I have always rejected this whole notion that in the movies, that's one of the things they have to bring over. I've always rejected that. They've never held to that really strongly in the movies. And Christopher Nolan tried to, scapegoat his way out of that. Because you remember that big scene, right, in Batman Begins with Ra's al Ghul? I'm not going to kill you, but it doesn't mean I have to save you. Ha ha. And then Liam Neeson falls to us and says, well, come on. You basically contributed to the death of that guy. You killed him. All right. They try to get a loophole around it. Well, no, he didn't technically kill him. He just selectively chose not to save him. You killed him. You killed him. Guess what? If I'm standing on a pier and there's some dude in the water right in front of me drowning and I could just reach down my hand and pull him up, but I just didn't, I can't be bothered. I'm responsible for that dude's death. I killed him. All right? I may not have pushed him in the water, but I killed him. That's the way I always felt. But yeah, I think, and look, I don't want to make excuses for why other people have the opinions that they have. I think that's a horrible thing we as film fans do too much. We make excuses for other people's opinions. Oh, you only like that because I don't like that. But I will say this. I think there were a lot of people who were never happy with Ben Affleck's casting as Batman and never were going to be happy with it. I think there are some people who, by choice, just decide that they hate DC and they're going to hate anything DC does. And that just, like having Ben Affleck's character kill some people, that just gave them ammunition and gave them an excuse to complain. Now, there are also lots and lots of people who just didn't like that happened, and that's fair enough. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Sometimes we as film fans, Marvin, I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. Sometimes we as film fans, we have selective memories. Raphael's Creative Style writes, 90% chance Man of Steel 2 will never happen. To re-quote Mean Girls, stop trying to make a cinematic universe happen. It's never going to happen. Well, the thing is, Raphael, it already has happened. They have a cinematic universe. So that's whatever happens with Superman is kind of besides the point now. Warner Brothers has created a cinematic universe. It's not like they're trying to make one. They did make one, and they've got one. How good or how bad of one it is up for you to decide as an individual, but they did make one, and they do have one. I'll take under 90% chance. Look, I still think there's a chance a Man of Steel 2 gets made. I don't think it's likely. I don't think it's probable. But I think 90% that it's never going to happen is a little bit too high. That's just kind of my assessment of it. I think there's still a chance. But yeah, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't bet that we were going to get a Man of Steel 2. But I still believe there's a chance, a better chance than just 10%. You know what I'm saying? So that's where I'm going to go on that. Micah T writes, does this potential Superman news make you give more, probably you mean make you get more angry with DC or give more credit to Marvel for how easy they're making it look? I mean, that's an excellent observation, Micah. It's a little bit of both. Like, I am very frustrated. Everybody knows as a Superman fan, I'm very frustrated for how Warner Brothers has treated Superman, both in television and in the movies now. I'm frustrated with how they've been treating him. I'm biased because Henry Cavill is my favorite Superman of all time. So yeah, I want him to stick around as Superman. But it's a great observation, Micah, to also point out it really does just highlight how well Kevin Feige has made that well-oiled machine work over there. It really does highlight how good of a job Marvel has done in making their cinematic universe. Because it's hard. And like I said earlier in the show, I think we just lose perspective and we see Marvel doing it, so we think it's easy, therefore it should be easy for everybody. And if something goes wrong with the DC cinematic universe, well, that just means they're dumb then. Well, maybe they're being dumb, but also maybe we have to take in consideration it's an incredibly delicate balancing act trying to make these film franchises run and work with a million moving pieces that you constantly got to be monitoring and caring for and taking care of. And sometimes pieces fall out of place. So it's a great observation, Mike. I think it's a little bit of both. Mark Newman writes, huge Superman fan. If Warner Brothers is dropping Henry Cavill, honestly, it's lowering my interest in comic book films altogether, even Marvel. Superman is the keystone for me. Superman is the keystone for me. Take that out, whole pyramid falls down for me. And you know what? That's a totally fair thing to say for you as a fan. Like, we all have certain fandoms. For me, like, for instance, let's take the World Cup this year, right? I'm not a big soccer fan, but I watch the World Cup every 4 years because I get in there, I'll cheer for Italy. Canada's never made it, so I can't cheer for Canada, but I'm living in the U.S., so I can cheer for the U.S., right? This past year at the World Cup, Italy still inexplicably did not qualify. So Italy wasn't in it, and the U.S. didn't qualify, and Canada never qualifies. Those were, like you were saying, that they were the cornerstones for me. For me to enjoy the World Cup, I really got to have Italy or at the very least Canada or the US in there. Mostly Italy. And they weren't there, so I just didn't care about the World Cup. Now, granted, a lot of that is the fact that I'm not a big soccer fan to begin with, but still, those are the cornerstones for me enjoying soccer. And when they weren't there, I didn't get all that interest in the World Cup and I didn't really watch it. So I can understand if for you as an individual, it's like, hey man, for me, superheroes start and finish with Superman. Superman is the guy. He is the superhero. My whole appreciation of the genre of superhero films is based on my love of Superman. Take Superman out, that could affect the rest of your fandom. As an individual, I respect that. I get that. I do. It's not how I personally feel. It's not how my kind of fandom with the hero movies is necessarily constructed, but I get it. I do. because I've had my World Cup situation. So I can go, oh yeah, that I could see how one would feel that way. So that sucks, man. It sucks. But what I would say is this, though. Remember, there was Superman before Henry Cavill. There will be Superman after Henry Cavill. So I would say, I would encourage you, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I would encourage you, hold tight, let's see what happens. Who knows, maybe they bring in another actor who's great and does a great Superman, and we can all be happy again. So I would just say, my encouragement to you as a fellow film fan and my brother in film fandom is hang on a little while. Let's see what happens. Just hang in there, dude. Hang in there. All right. Jamaican writes, if it's true that DC, a lot of people want to talk about Superman today. If it's true that DC's getting rid of their best assets, what the fuck? I agree they shouldn't reboot, or I agree they should reboot with the same cast. Oh, I disagree on that completely. The audience are smart enough to figure out, no, it's just dumb. Like, look, if you're rebooting, reboot. Rebooting means starting fresh. Wiping away the old, starting fresh. You don't need the same cast. And look, and I've said this before, everybody knows how much I love Henry Cavill as Superman, my all-time favorite Superman. But even I have said, if you reboot, you recast Superman. There are other actors who can come in. Like, let's not pretend. This is something that we as film fans do sometimes. We see an actor in a role and think, only that actor can play that role. No, that's not true. That's a fallacy. Other actors can come in and play the role maybe even better. And guess what? If a lot of the movie-going audience has a bad taste in their mouth with what the DC Cinematic Universe is now, and whether we like it or not, that's the case. There's a lot of film fans out there who have a bad taste in their mouth about the DCU and have never been on board with it right from the beginning. That's unfortunate. It's not how I feel, but it is nonetheless, we will all acknowledge that's the case. Right from day one that they tried launching this new DCEU movie with Man of Steel, there's been a lot of the film-going audience that does not like it. If you want to wipe the slate clean, that means you wipe the slate clean. You bring in new actors, you bring in new stories, you say you're starting over again, and you go from there. That's the way you reboot. If you just keep the same cast, you're not rebooting. And all you're telling the audience is this is just the same stuff. We're just doing the same thing. And look, I'll tell you what. One really good example of this is, the movie Ghost Rider came out with Nicolas Cage. Not a lot of people love Ghost Rider. The movie. Not a lot of people love the Ghost Rider movie. A couple of friends of mine, Mark Neveldine, Brian Taylor, they get the nod to direct another Ghost Rider movie. And I'm telling you what, it was a mistake for them to bring Nicolas Cage back. It was a mistake. They were rebooting it. I knew they were going to try to reboot Ghost Rider. Great. But then I found out they got Nicolas Cage back. So they started to call it a requel. Like, we're rebooting, but yeah, we're keeping the same guy. Nobody cared about it. Everybody just looked, no matter what they thought, oh no, we're restarted. We're telling a new We're telling a new Ghost Rider story, but we're going to bring back the same guy who played it in the last movie that people didn't like. Well, the audience just saw it. It's like, oh, it's just another Ghost Rider movie. And I didn't like the last one, so no, I'm taking a pass. That's essentially the same situation here. I love Henry Cavill as Superman. I want Henry Cavill as my Superman. But I'm telling you, if you reboot, then you got to reboot. Put in new actors. And have more success. So, yeah, that's just the way I kind of feel on that. Okay. Dirk Diggler writes, Amen. Thank you for saying how I feel about the DCU. I think you're probably talking about that rant I had the other day about how, look, we love the DCU, but it is frustrating when Marvel keeps doing all these things that gives their audience confidence, and Warner Brothers keeps doing all these things that give their audience anxiety. That was the big speech I did the other day. So, yeah, I think that's how a lot of us feel, Dirk. Cade W. writes, do you think AMC A-List will end up crumbling like MoviePass, or do you think they've planned accordingly for any possible shortcomings? Oh, look, I'll tell you what, I've told this story before, but when I was with AMC, we're going back years and years and years. When I was with AMC, remember that was years ago, they were already planning a movie subscription service like with what eventually became A-List. Because they were looking at what Cineworld was doing in the UK, they were studying it, and they were already planning it years ago. See, some people think that AMC A-List was a response to MoviePass. It wasn't. AMC was looking and studying this before MoviePass ever became a big thing. They have been planning this for years. So yeah, this wasn't some knee-jerk reaction response to MoviePass. They have been studying this, planning this, looking at all the possible outcomes. How do we benefit from it? What are the potential risks? Blah, 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 blah. They have done all of that research so that when they launched it, they could have confidence in it. So no, I don't see AMC A-List crumbling at all. I don't see it crumbling at all. Let's see. Punto Baby 1 writes, have you ever seen Stan Winston's Pumpkinhead? Oh, the one with Lance Henriksen? Yeah, that was like 1986, 1987, 1988, somewhere in that window there. Not great. And Stan Winston directed it. I didn't think the movie was great. I'll be honest with you. I did not think it was great. So, yeah, I mean, look, is it some schlocky fun in it? Yeah, there's some schlocky fun in it. It's always great watching Lance Henriksen in anything. He was in The Blacklist the last couple of years, actually, which is really cool to see. Anyway, so yeah, but not my favorite one at all. All right, guys, that will do it for this installment of the companion video. Thank you so much for joining me here. Listen, guys, we got more companion videos coming this weekend. Don't forget that also the John Campea Show is back Monday morning at 9 a.m. Make sure you're back to join us then. That'll do it for me. My name's John Campea, and until our next video, bye-bye.